Shadows on the Sea by Joan Hyatt Harlow. Jill's transformation. Don't worry so much. Don't worry so much. Jill Winters leaned her forehead against the train window and peered out through the raindrops at the early summer landscape. It was bleak, more like April than June. At another time, the sound of the wheels clicking over the tracks might have lulled her to sleep, but today it mingled with the thoughts and regrets that pounded in her head. Don't worry so much. Don't worry so much. Earlier this month, her father, a popular singer, flew out to California to do some concerts and radio shows. It was nice to have a famous father, but Jill missed him when he traveled. Even though the country was at war, Dad's popularity had snowballed, not only because of his beautiful voice and good looks, but because he touched the hearts of his audiences with his stage presence and down-to-earth charm. His agent was booking him for appearances here, there, just about everywhere. Less than a week after Dad left, Mom had gotten the news that her brother, Jill's Uncle Cliff, was critically ill with cancer. Mom was determined to go to the British colony of Newfoundland to take care of him. "I'll be all right, Jill," her mother assured her. "I'll be taking the Caribou across the Gulf of St. Lawrence. It's just a merchant ship. It won't be a target for German submarines." But everyone knew Newfoundland was an important military base for American and Canadian troops. U-boats, German submarines, patrolled the waters around the great rocky island like circling sharks, waiting. Jill's mother's amber eyes filled with tears when Jill had begged, "Let me go with you." "I can't take you, darling. The only reason they're letting me go is that I'm the next of kin to Cliff and a registered nurse. They won't let me take a child along. It may be dangerous." "I'm not a child. I'm 14. Besides, if it's too dangerous for me, it's too dangerous for you," Jill argued. "Jill, I've got to go," Mom explained. "Cliff is in a far-off port, and he's all alone. He needs me." "I need you." "Jill, he's my brother," Mom had said impatiently. "You can't understand because you don't have brothers or sisters. You care more about Uncle Cliff than me. I'll bet Daddy will let me join him in California if I ask him." Jill stomped off to her room, threw herself on her bed, and hugged her pillow. Her father had called that night, but spoke to Mom first. When Jill took the telephone in her room, she waited until her mother hung up the extension, then pleaded, Can I come out to California, Daddy?" Dad said, "No, Jill, it's not safe for you to be traveling all over the country on a crazy schedule like mine." There was a long silence. Then he said, "You know, Nana would love to have you spend some time with her in Maine this summer." Her father hung up and within a few minutes called back. "It's all set. Nana is tickled to pieces to have you stay with her. Summer in Maine?" It sounded awful. Even though she loved Nana, Jill didn't want to go. She didn't have any friends up there. She'd be bored and lonely all summer. When Mom left, a few days later, she tried to give Jill a hug, but Jill pulled away. Before getting into the taxi, her mother threw a kiss to Jill, who watched from the window, and Jill grudgingly nodded goodbye but didn't send a kiss. Jill's best friend, Patty, and her mother, Mrs. Hayden, had come to stay with Jill until she left for Maine the following week. "You should have been kinder to your mother, Jill. She's going on a sad mission." Mrs. Hayden frowned her disapproval. "Besides, we're at war, and everyone has to make sacrifices. Your mother had to make a hard choice, and you didn't make it any easier for her." Jill slumped on the couch, guilty and scared. What if something happened to Mom? Jill wished she had thrown that goodbye kiss. She got up and ran to the window, but the taxi was gone. Jill's eyes brimmed, and she reached for one of her mother's lace-trimmed handkerchiefs that was left crumpled on the coffee table. As Jill wiped her eyes, she could smell the scent of tweed, her mother's favorite perfume. She choked back a sob. After her mother left, Jill began paying more attention to radio news. She heard Walter Winchell report that from January to June, this very year, 1942, more than 170 ships had been sunk in American waters. Innocent American, Canadian, and Newfoundland merchant vessels like the Caribou, silhouetted against brightly lit East Coast cities, were easy targets for German U-boats. Today, Patty and her mother had driven Jill to Boston to take the train to Maine. "Lucky you, traveling all the way to Winter Haven alone? It's so mature." Patty kissed her goodbye, then whispered, "Have fun. Once the train starts, get into those glamour slacks and pretend you're 16. Patty was right, Jill decided. Taking a train by herself really was mature. Her folks felt she was mature enough to travel all the way up to the coast by herself. She'd get along just fine without her parents. She didn't need them one single bit. Yet, she couldn't forget how sad Mom had looked when she said goodbye. Jill looked at her reflection in the train window. There she was, Jill Elizabeth Winters. Her brown hair hung to her shoulders in natural curls. Her eyes were large, wide-set, and the color of honey. In the reflection, her face stood out rather pale against a white Peter Pan collar on her dress. I hate Peter Pan collars, she thought. They are so childish. Patty had said have fun. Well, if she had to be on this miserable trip, she'd make the most of it. After all, she was on her own for the first time. She'd try to stop worrying so much and do whatever she felt like doing, and right now, she felt like getting rid of the Peter Pan collar. Jill pulled out the smaller of her two suitcases from under the seat and headed for the lavatory at the far end of the passenger car. Once inside, she locked the door and put her bag on the floor. She peered into the toilet and could see the train tracks and cross ties zooming by. That's awful, she thought. The toilets don't flush. They just empty out onto the ground. She slammed the cover down, sat on the seat, opened her bag, and took out her new slacks. Grinning, she held them up. A nice shade of blue cotton sateen. Her parents would die if they knew how she'd spent her clothing money. Slacks had become more acceptable since the war had started, especially for women working in factories where skirts could be dangerous. Movie stars were beginning to wear them everywhere. However, girls were not allowed to wear slacks to school. When Jill begged for a pair, Mom had said, overalls are okay for a hike in the woods, but slacks for everyday use are just not ladylike. Patty's mom let the girls have a special day together after Jill's mother had left. Jill secretly bought the slack suit. Patty giggled and swore she'd never tell. Jill wasn't sure what Nana's reaction would be. I can handle Nana, she told herself confidently. Jill removed her dress and scowled at it. So prissy and juvenile. After taking off her slip, she pulled on the slacks, donned a flowered blue and tan shirt, and peered into the small mirror over the sink. She braided her hair, weaving a blue gauze-grain ribbon into the thick braid. That looks glamorous, she thought, just like Dorothy Lamour in the movie Road to Singapore. And finally, she slipped into the matching jacket. It had huge shoulder pads and the newest military style. Jill fumbled through her bag until she found her white bobby socks. Hidden in one was a tube of Tan-G lipstick. Her parents had made it clear that she couldn't wear lipstick until she was 16. Carefully, she applied the Tan-G and pressed her lips together. It was such a pale orange it could hardly be noticed, so she applied it again. When she got to Maine, she'd buy some real lipstick. Jill jumped up and down, straining to see her whole image in the small mirror. That's better. I really do look 16, she decided with a smug grin. She stuffed her dress and slip into her bag and snapped it shut. Satisfied and feeling quite mature, Jill stepped out of the restroom just in time to hear the porter call out, "Supper is being served in the dining car."